The year 2024 had been a tense one in the Middle East, with the Israel-Palestine conflict simmering beneath the surface. Sporadic violence and clashes served as grim reminders of the ever-present potential for things to boil over. The Gaza Strip, a densely populated Palestinian territory, had been under Israeli blockade for over a decade, leading to dire humanitarian conditions. The presence of Hamas, considered a terrorist organization by Israel and many Western countries, further complicated the situation. In this powder keg of a region, any spark had the potential to ignite a major conflagration, and ignite it did, on a day that would shake the foundations of the already fragile peace. On October 19, 2024, the unthinkable happened. A drone, its origin unknown at the time, penetrated Israeli airspace and launched an attack on the private residence of the Israeli Prime Minister. The attack, though unsuccessful in causing any physical harm, sent shockwaves through Israel and the international community. This unprecedented attack, targeting the heart of Israeli power, represented a significant escalation in the conflict. It shattered the illusion of security and raised serious questions about Israel's vulnerability to such attacks. The Israeli government immediately launched an investigation to determine who was behind the attack and how they had managed to breach their defenses. Suspicions immediately fell on Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant group based in Lebanon, which had a history of conflict with Israel. As details of the drone attack emerged, Israel wasted no time in responding. The Israeli Air Force launched a series of airstrikes targeting what they claimed were Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon. The strikes, carried out with precision munitions, aimed to cripple Hezbollah's military capabilities and deter future attacks. However, the airstrikes were not limited to Lebanon. Israel also launched a major offensive against targets in the Gaza Strip, targeting Hamas infrastructure and personnel. The Israeli government accused Hamas of being complicit in the drone attack, claiming they provided logistical support to Hezbollah. Hamas, for its part, denied any involvement in the drone attack but vowed to retaliate against the Israeli airstrikes. The situation spiraled rapidly out of control, with both sides exchanging fire in a deadly game of tit for tat. The international community watched with growing alarm as the situation in the Middle East deteriorated. World leaders condemned the violence and called for an immediate ceasefire. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting to discuss the crisis, but their efforts to pass a resolution were stymied by the veto power of the United States, a staunch ally of Israel. The United States, while expressing support for Israel's right to defend itself, also urged restraint and called for de-escalation. European countries, traditionally more critical of Israel's policies towards the Palestinians, condemned the disproportionate use of force against Gaza and called for an end to the blockade. Despite the international pressure, neither Israel nor Hamas showed any signs of backing down. Both sides felt justified in their actions, viewing them as necessary measures to protect their people and interests. The conflict once again seemed intractable. Section 5. The human cost of conflict. As the bombs rained down and rockets soared through the sky, it was the civilians on both sides who bore the brunt of the violence. In Gaza, where the population was densely packed and infrastructure was already crumbling due to the blockade, the airstrikes caused widespread destruction and loss of life. Hospitals, schools, and residential buildings were reduced to rubble, burying families under the debris. In Israel, the constant threat of rocket fire from Gaza forced people to seek shelter in bomb shelters. Schools and businesses were closed and life was put on hold as the fear of indiscriminate attacks loomed large. The psychological toll of the conflict, especially on children who had never known peace, was immeasurable. The international community, while condemning the violence, seemed powerless to stop it. Aid organizations struggled to provide assistance to those in need, but their efforts were hampered by the ongoing fighting and the restrictions imposed by both sides. The conflict once again laid bare the brutal reality of war and its devastating impact on innocent lives. Section 6. The weaponization of fear. The drone attack on the Israeli Prime Minister's residence had a profound psychological impact. It shattered the illusion of security that Israel had carefully constructed. A simple drone penetrating defenses sent shockwaves through Israeli society. This vulnerability was exacerbated by the constant rocket fire from Gaza. The Iron Dome, though effective, couldn't provide complete protection. The possibility of a rocket slipping through created fear and anxiety. Hamas understood the power of fear. By launching rockets, they aimed to erode Israeli morale. Section 7. A history steeped in conflict. To understand the current crisis, one must delve into the long history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For over a century, these two peoples have been locked in a bitter struggle for land and self-determination. The roots of the conflict trace back to the late 19th century with the rise of Zionism. The Zionist movement gained momentum in the early 20th century, fueled by anti-Semitism in Europe. Jewish immigration to Palestine increased, leading to tensions with the indigenous Arab population. After World War II, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine into two states, but this plan was rejected by the Arab leadership. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War resulted in Israel's victory and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. This event, known as the Nakba, remains a festering wound in the collective memory of the Palestinian people. Section 8. Shifting sands of international diplomacy. The international community has long been involved in trying to broker a peaceful solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, raised hopes for a two-state solution, with Israel and an independent Palestine living side by side in peace and security. However, the Oslo process ultimately failed due to a lack of trust between the parties, continued violence, and the expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories. In recent years, the international consensus on a two-state solution has begun to fray. The Trump administration's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the US embassy there was widely condemned by the international community and further alienated the Palestinians. The Biden administration has reversed some of Trump's policies, but the damage has been done. The current crisis has once again exposed the limitations of international diplomacy in resolving this intractable conflict. With both sides deeply entrenched in their positions and unwilling to make the necessary concessions for peace, the prospects for a negotiated settlement seem dim. Section 9. The uncertain road ahead. As the dust settles on the latest round of violence, the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains as uncertain as ever. The cycle of violence, retaliation, and recrimination seems deeply ingrained, with each generation inheriting the grievances of the past. The drone attack on the Israeli Prime Minister's residence has raised the stakes even higher, demonstrating the potential for low-intensity conflict to escalate rapidly. The international community, while eager to see an end to the violence, seems to have few levers to pull. Sanctions against Israel are unlikely, given the strong support it enjoys from the United States. Hamas, already designated as a terrorist organization by many countries, is also unlikely to be swayed by international pressure. The two-state solution, once seen as the only viable path to peace, seems increasingly distant. With the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and the deep divisions within Palestinian society, the possibility of creating a contiguous and viable Palestinian state seems remote. Section 10. A glimmer of hope. Despite the bleak outlook, there are glimmers of hope. Civil society organizations work tirelessly to build bridges of understanding. These organizations provide a ray of light in a dark landscape. Individual stories of courage and compassion offer a counter-narrative. Stories of Israelis and Palestinians reaching across the divide are powerful. As long as there are those who refuse to give up, there is hope for peace. Section 11. The unending cycle. The recent drone attack on the Israeli Prime Minister's residence and the subsequent escalation of violence serve as a stark reminder of the intractable nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The cycle of violence, retaliation, and recrimination seems deeply ingrained, with no easy solutions in sight. The international community, while expressing concern and calling for restraint, seems powerless to break this cycle. The two-state solution, once seen as the only viable path to peace, seems increasingly distant. The future remains uncertain, with the potential for further escalation always present. As long as the underlying issues of land, resources, and security remain unaddressed, the conflict will continue to cast a long shadow over the region. The human cost of this conflict is immeasurable, with countless lives lost and futures shattered. The only hope for a lasting peace lies in a fundamental shift in attitudes and a willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue and compromise. Until then, the cycle of violence seems destined to continue.